Hey everyone, sorry for taking a bit of a break. I was just trying some new equipment and seeing what sounded better or worse, so it took a bit of time. Anyway, this isn't a new video, but is similar to the last one featuring 2 new stories in an old video. So sorry it's not a full new video, but one will be coming soon. Anyway, enjoy. This happened several years ago during my second year of university. I lived in a private/student rented house with 2 other students from my course. This incident happened on the weekend when my 2 housemates were away visiting family and friends. I stayed at the house due to upcoming exams and lots of revisions that had to be done. To note, 2 weeks prior on my way home from my part-time job at around 10:30 p.m., I was being followed by 2 men around their mid-20s. Both were wearing dark clothing and hoodies. They kept shouting things to get my attention, and I pretty much sprinted home once I realized that they weren't going to leave me alone. They never got close enough for me to see their face or identity, and I never looked back to see if they were still behind me and saw where I lived. Anyway, it was around 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, and I was studying in my room, which was on the ground floor at the back of the house through the kitchen. I was sure I had locked all the doors, but the student houses were crap and had even crappier security measures. There had been rumors of a few break-ins in the area for high-value items like computers and laptops, but as usual, the "it won't happen to me" mentality prevailed in my head. Shortly after 1:15 a.m., I began to hear some muffled, deep voices that sounded like they were coming from next door. I listened for a few minutes trying to gauge exactly where the voices were. I realized that the voices sounded much closer and in fact could have been at the front of our house. Suddenly the voices stopped, and I began to hear my front door rattle. Panic set in, and my blood ran cold as I realized someone was trying to enter my home. I also knew that my 2 roommates weren't coming home for at least 2 days. Student houses have individual door locks on all bedroom doors, so I slowly slid across my desk and winced as I carefully turned the lock on my door and crawled underneath my desk, gripping my mobile phone in my now very sweaty hot hands, and closed my eyes. I heard the front door open and heavy footsteps flood the hallway. At this point, I was silently crying and trying to process the 1,000,001 thoughts flying through my head. I had sliding patio doors in my room that led into our back garden, but the garden just led into someone else's garden, and we had a large fence all around, so I wouldn't have been able to climb without drawing attention to myself. I decided I wasn't going to do anything, and instead stayed underneath my desk, paralyzed with fear. I heard the footsteps go directly upstairs. They were almost running around the 2nd floor of the house, not caring about making noise. I heard banging and rummaging and sometimes the deep voices again. I am still at this point sitting trembling underneath my desk, expecting my door handle to be rattled at any second. About 5 or so minutes pass, and I hear them running downstairs and presumably out the way they came in. I remained where I was for another 15 or so minutes and eventually called the police. I briefly whispered what had happened, though I was pretty hysterical at this point and was unable to confirm whether the intruders were still inside the house. 5 or 6 minutes later, the police arrived to confirm that the door had been tampered with and broken open. My 2 roommates' laptops had been taken, and their rooms were both in a messy state. The police suggested that the robbers must have thought that no one was home, and that because my room was downstairs and through the kitchen, they must have presumed it wasn't a bedroom, and likely went straight upstairs to where they thought any items of value would be. Although I escaped this situation unharmed, it still haunts me to this day thinking of what would have happened if they noticed I was home, or if they had made their way into my bedroom. The story happened to my mother back when she was around 19 or 20 years old. My mother was born in the late 50s in Detroit, so keep in mind that she came from a sort of safer time when it was more socially acceptable to play in the streets at night. Anyways, winters in Michigan were rough. There's snow and sleet everywhere, and you couldn't go anywhere without a ton of clothes on. My mom was coming out of a local grocery store, and this little old lady came up to her with her face almost completely covered. The woman explained that she needed a ride to her house. My mom was reluctant at first and questioned why she didn't have money for a phone call or family to pick her up. This whole situation was odd, but my mother explained that she used to pick up a lot of hitchhikers, so she figured this frail old lady shouldn't be out in the cold by herself. My mother began to put groceries in the trunk and said that it was okay to get in the car. The woman got in the back seat for some reason. My mom just figured that she was probably more comfortable in the back and didn't question it. She then put the car in drive and they went on their merry way. And the woman then said that her house was only a couple of blocks away, but my mother continued to drive for a couple of minutes, and when my mom began to question how much farther it was going to be, the woman just replied, "Just another block or two." This is when everything went to hell. My mother came up to a red light at a busy intersection. At this point, she began to get a weird feeling, but nothing too alarming. As my mom was looking around from behind the wheel, she looked in her rearview mirror, threw her car in park, and shoved open her door. It was no longer a little old lady in the back seat, but a man who was trying to lure my mother to God knows where. My mother was right in the middle of the intersection. She got out of her car and opened the backseat door. She, in her own words, told the man, "Get the hell out of my car right now." He got up, looked at her with an emotionless stare, and walked away into the street. My mother never picked up strangers again after that.
Note: I am female and was 15 at the time of this incident. One evening, there was this local Christian rock band playing at the church that we attended. We were excited as we both knew everyone in the band and were very much fans. It was crowded and I felt like I needed to get some air, so I let Alice know that I was going on the outside for a few minutes and would be back before the band started up. She nodded and I went on my way outside. I sat down on the steps and just hung out there for a bit. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see this figure shuffling towards me, almost limping. I didn't think too much of it at first, and just looked away, but a few seconds later I saw this figure getting closer. It was a man with long, knotted hair and a beard, and what looked like rags for clothes. I turned to look at the man, and our eyes locked. At this point I felt my throat close up and my stomach sink. I can't explain why I felt pure terror. I was frozen. I couldn't blink, breathe, move, or even think. The man grew closer and then stopped right in front of me and looked down at me with a strange, blank expression. One of his eyes was a different color than the other, but they just had this empty look to them. I felt helpless. There wasn't anyone around at all, as everyone was inside waiting for the next band to start. Jeff then came up behind me and screamed, "You need to get out of here. You need to leave right now." The man walked away, limping with every step. Jeff pulled me up and asked me if I was alright. I told him I was fine. After the concert was over, most of the people went home. I went up to Jeff and asked him why he had come outside. He said he didn't know why he went outside. He just said something in his gut had told him to. It was the strangest thing. A couple of days after that, Jeff called me and told me to turn on the local news, and I did. There was a picture of the man that I had seen that night. That same long knotted hair, that beard, those eyes. He was arrested for rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl, 2 days prior to his arrest. That same night I saw him. Back in 2013, I was freshly single and new in town, so I made a profile on Plenty of Fish, a site and mobile app dating service I used primarily for coffee dates. But after I started making friends, I got a little bit more comfortable with the idea of going out at night. I typically employed the buddy system and never really got a problem with any weirdos in person. I had been talking to this guy, Dave, for about a week before we made our first plans to go out. I had invited a female coworker and he said it was no problem. It said that he would bring a friend also. However, at the last minute, he said his friend was feeling anxious and couldn't be persuaded to go. I assured him my coworker wasn't looking for a date, but he understandably declined as to not make things awkward for anyone. Without much thought, my coworker and I still went to the bar that Dave had suggested. It was a really popular place. I chatted with Dave a bit more through the app before I gave him my number. It seemed harmless at the time. Now that he had my number, I felt strange that we actually hadn't met, so I suggested a coffee date. He bailed on plans twice, but continued to text me all the time. I thought nothing strange of it, at least, not yet. Then I started getting texts from all hours of the night. Whenever I called, he would reply with a text. It just started giving me a weird vibe. At worst, I thought maybe he was just an unstable drug addict. So I gradually stopped chatting with him as much. After all, there were other guys more able and willing to take me out, which is what I had actually signed up for. He caught on that he was losing my interest and asked rather boldly if I had met someone else. Not wanting to lead him on, I confirmed that I was playing the field and that I just didn't feel that connection with him anymore. With that sociopath, my approach wouldn't have mattered. He would have turned on me regardless. He called me a slut, said I was giving my time to the wrong guys, and accused me of dating only pretty boys. At this aha moment, all of his pictures on POF were a pretty decent looking guy who dressed well and clearly styled his hair. A pretty boy? Yeah? I had been so quick to try to get out of town that I had never even asked for a Skype date or a picture from my contacts. Dave was clearly catfishing me. I ignored his tantrum. I stopped talking to him for good that day, but he wasn't done with me. Every day he would text me as though we were still conversing normally, all one-sided things about new books he was reading or restaurants he was trying. After I realized he just wasn't gonna quit, I added this number to the block list and thought that would be the end of it. But nope. A few months later, I started getting texts from a new number. Hey, just junk. How are you? What's new? Are you still single? Assuming that this was a guy, I tried to do the decent thing and reply. I said I wasn't really dating anyone at the moment and apologized if I had been rude or unclear about my intentions, seeing as how I just used the dating app a couple months ago. And he replied, "No, it's Dave. It was pretty clear you don't want to talk to me anymore, so I'm texting you from my friend's phone. I just have a few things I need to get off my chest. Please, I need closure." He went on to admit that he wasn't the guy in the pictures and requested a do-over as friends. I humored him and thought out with a well-thought empathetic explanation as to why I just didn't want that. And then he lashed out again, saying I'm heartless and didn't understand his plight. Over the day or so, he continued texting me, apologizing for his behavior, then lashing out again when he didn't get a reply from me. Eventually, he succumbed and just ended with some lament about how we can't be friends. That's when the texting stopped for a little while. Then one day I'm driving on the freeway and my phone goes crazy. I took a quick glance, but just to see that it was an unknown number. I was approaching my exit, almost at my destination, and I figured it can wait. Before I got out of the car, I wanted to call my friends just to talk, but I figured the unknown number might be a friend texting from someone else's phone. So I checked that first. "Is that you in that silver Toyota Camry?" "Yeah, it's you. You look super pretty." I was hoping it was a practical joke, but didn't want to take the chance. I called up the friend who lives... I was hoping it was a practical joke, but didn't want to take the chance. I called up a friend who lives the closest, and sure enough, she was already inside. The rest of the night goes off without a hitch, but I stayed the night at her place just to be safe. I got brave at her place and decided to text the number back. I texted, "Who is this? Dave?" I called him, but he just kept ignoring me. Then I texted him huge amounts, just telling him how he's being inappropriate and how I'm gonna threaten to call the cops on him. And that I demand he leave me alone. Once I had said all I could, he congratulated me for clearing the slate and proposed that we could be friends again. I told him to fuck off. Then nothing happened after that. The Dave days spanned for about a whole year. I blocked his number, his friend's number, and the new number that had texted me from while essentially stalking me. He never left me notes on my car or at home, so I truly forgot about him and never saw a need to change my number. But now that it's 2015, guess who's texting me up again? 2013 was when it started. I was just graduating from the university, and where I was from, 90% of those who take up engineering are male. Hence, I am used to spending most of my time with guy friends. I soon accepted the first job offer that came my way, even if it was 2 hours away from where I lived. It was not a surprise that most of my colleagues are male as well, and soon enough I was on friendly terms with almost everyone. My parents own an orchard in a rural area. Without a car, you have to walk at least 1 kilometer in a gravel road before taking a turn and walking 800 meters uphill. We have flame trees lining the driveway, and it's really beautiful during daytime, but really dark at night since you can't even see the stars. One of my coworkers named James lived about 15 minutes away, and we decided to carpool on our way home since we both lived pretty far away. We had been carpooling for about a month when I let myself fall asleep on the ride home. I guess combined with the 2 glasses of wine from the office party, and James not giving off any creepy vibes, and it not being the first time that I'd carpooled with a sole male, that I got too comfortable. I woke up with the sensation of someone touching my hand and opened my eyes to find that we were parked in the middle of a long driveway, headlights off, with James caressing and sniffling my hand. My mind immediately went to, what the fuck is he doing? I snatched my hand back and he said he was sorry. Before he even turned the key in the ignition, I had opened the car door and said my goodbyes and ran to my house. The next day I didn't go into work, primarily because I really didn't want an encounter with James. He sent me messages to ask about my whereabouts, and I didn't plan to respond to any of it until he said, "I'll just come see you later." And since he knew where I lived, I told him that I was actually busy and would not have the time to see him. When I got back to work, Sam, one of my few female colleagues, approached me. Apparently, James asked her if I had told her what I was doing in my absence and insinuated that we'd spent the night together. Sam knew I was in a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend of 4 years and kindly informed me that the rumor mill has been very active while I was away, thanks to James. I never carpooled with James again. Because of the gossip that circulated, some of the guys tried making passes on me. This made me very angry. Before this, I was the type to let the small things go, but I went and confronted James to get his shit together and stop spreading gossip. He proceeded to tell me that he loved me and that he thought I was going to break up with my boyfriend for him. Fortunately, we don't work on the same projects and I had no reason to talk to him, so I didn't. Then the calls started coming. James would call my mobile phone in between midnight to 3 a.m. and all I could hear was heavy breathing. I would hang up after a few seconds, and then I'd get messages saying, "Someday we'll be together, you belong with me," and other similar disturbing messages. I blocked his number soon after. He resigned a few months later, and I found out about it when someone from the HR department set up a meeting with me. Apparently his reason for leaving the company was that I keep bothering him, and that he wants to be in a safe working environment. I couldn't take it anymore, and started crying while telling the poor woman the story. Sam, who became my confidant, wasn't even calling in to verify it. He had already left by then, and only mentioned me during his exit interview. Then the emails started coming in. It was already 2014, I kept getting emails from various email addresses, on both my personal and work accounts. I marked those as spam without reading it. At this point, I wasn't even angry, I was just treating them as a constant annoyance. Until anonymous Tumblr Ask messages started floating my reblog account. Unlike emails where I never bothered to read the content, I was shocked to read him describing the exact moments in the afternoon when I went out to the office to head home, where I had lunch among my coworkers, and what I was wearing and other details like that. After disabling my anonymous messages, those messages started coming from throwaway accounts and I eventually deactivated my account entirely. And because I am an idiot, I went to my email junk folder and found out that he had been sending me these messages for a while already. The blood drained from my face when I realized I had never even noticed him at all. I started getting really paranoid on who I talked to and started ordering takeaway so I didn't have to go out for lunch. It was on October when I finally told my parents about it, and they let me one of those cars so I didn't have to walk outside of the office building. December came and I was spending the weekend with my boyfriend out of town. I was posting photos online with an Instagram account I had just created, when all of a sudden a throwaway account suddenly started tagging me in the comments on my friends' accounts, accompanied with deeply offensive slurs against me. We were on our way back when I checked my Instagram notifications, and although he left so many comments on my friends' accounts, he only left one on mine. It was a photo of me and my boyfriend. It was titled, "Where's Puppy?" I have a 12-year-old dog who's a golden retriever named Puppy, and I immediately called home to ask about her. We usually let her run around the orchard during daytime, but she comes running when you call. My brother couldn't find her anywhere, and I started becoming more frantic on the car ride home. My mom reported to the police that someone trespassed on our property and may have stolen our dog. But they couldn't really do much since they couldn't scour 5 acres of land for a dog. We did find Puppy after 2 days. One of the staff heard howling in a shallow grave. One leg was broken and she was full of scratches. I cried when I saw her. She was weakly wagging her tail when she saw me and started crying until I got to her. We spent a few days in the hospital for her injuries. After that, my parents decided to heighten our security by hiring guards for the property, and I couldn't go anywhere without someone accompanying me. I started looking for another job because I felt so distrusting of my colleagues whenever I was in public. The sight of firearm-carrying men patrolling the home that I had once felt safe in just tore me apart on the inside. I had almost little to no privacy. I heard there were a few other trespassers that had been caught, but my parents always assured me that none of them were James. That became my life, until one day my parents realized that I hadn't heard anything from him for a long time. The guard still remained as of writing, but since May of this year, I've had the liberty of going out on my own. I still have a mini heart attack whenever I see a strange email coming my way, or an unknown number calls me. Although I will always wonder why he just stopped, I'm very glad that it's over. Who knows, maybe he's terrorizing another poor girl, or he just realized that it's just not worth it. I now have trust issues and barely even attempt to even make new friends. So James, if we ever meet again, I hope it's on our property and you get shot in the face. A little background information. I'm a female in the American military stationed overseas in Germany. It's my second base and I'm not high ranking. I moved here in July and I live on the barracks on base. I'm single with no kids. A few weeks ago I had little to no groceries in my room, so I decided to take a trip to the commissary. It was a grocery store, but on the base. I went to go and stand in the sandwich line as it was getting close to lunch. That's when an older man, maybe about his late 30s or older 40s, turned around and asked how my day was going. Being from the South, I am used to being talked to by strangers all the time. I replied politely that my day was going fine, and I then bought groceries and left. I was super lazy and tired, so I didn't leave my room until I had to start my shift the next morning. I walked out of my car and saw a note on my windshield wipers. Confused, I picked it up and read, and it said, "Hello, I think you're cute and funny." When I first read the note, I thought it was a cute military police officer that had lived in the same barracks that I do. So of course, I emailed him back and asked him where I knew him from. He told me that he had talked to me at the commissary the day before. I thought that was weird. I couldn't understand how he knew what my car looked like. Maybe he just so happened to walk out of the commissary at the same time I did, or maybe he just put the note on my car at the commissary and I didn't notice until this morning. After emailing back and forth for maybe an hour, he told me that he thought it was cute and that he followed me back to the dorms and left a note on my car. I thought that was extremely creepy, and I told him I was no longer interested in speaking with him and left it at that. Over the course of the next 2 days, I received 50 emails from him. He kept saying things like, I have fantasies about pulling younger military officers into my office and having my way with them. And then he kept saying things like, I think you're beautiful, I'm older and have money, I want to marry a young woman and retire. Why the fuck won't you reply? Email me back, you slut. If you don't email me back, I will tell the chain of command terrible things about you. And so on. After about 2 days of this, I sent him an email in the evening advising him to stop messaging me, period. About 5 minutes later, I hear a knock on my barracks door. I'm a little freaked out, as I do not like people showing up at my place unannounced. I look through the blind to see the man from the commissary. I don't answer and eventually he goes away. It really freaked me out that he followed me home from the commissary and knew which barrack I lived in. After that incident, I seldom get emails from him anymore. I haven't heard from him in about a week, so hopefully it stays that way. So creeper at the commissary? Let's not meet.